The throne room of Valdris Keep fell silent as the prisoner was dragged through the iron doors. King Calen Thorne sat motionless on the obsidian throne, his silver eyes tracking the hooded figure being hauled between two elite guards. The wolf inside him paced restlessly, as it always did when threats approached his territory. But tonight, something was different. His beast seemed agitated in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Your Majesty," Commander Rorik announced, forcing the prisoner to their knees on the cold stone floor. "We found this one scaling the eastern wall, armed with wolfsbane-tipped blades and a vial of silver nitrate." A murmur rippled through the assembled wolves. An assassin. Another one sent by the Southern Coalition to end the last Alpha King. Calen leaned forward, studying the kneeling figure. Small for an assassin. Slight of build. The hood obscured their face entirely, but he could see pale hands bound in iron chains, hands that seemed too delicate for a killer. "Remove the hood," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Rorik reached down and yanked the fabric back. The prisoner was a woman. Her hair was cropped short, dark as a raven's wing, and her face bore the angular beauty of the old bloodlines. But it was her eyes that made Calen's blood freeze in his veins. Amber gold, defiant, achingly familiar. No, impossible. His wolf surged forward with a force that nearly cracked his composure. Every instinct screamed a single word: mate. But Seraphine was dead. He had watched her burn. 5 years ago, he had stood helpless as flames consumed the woman who held his soul, her screams echoing through his nightmares ever since. He had torn apart 3 kingdoms searching for her killers. He had nearly destroyed himself with grief. And now this stranger knelt before him with Seraphine's eyes. "What is your name?" Calen's voice came out rougher than intended. The woman lifted her chin, meeting his gaze without fear. "Names are meaningless," she said. Her voice was different, harder, colder. But beneath it, he caught the familiar melody that had once whispered his name in the dark. "I asked you a question." He rose from his throne, descending the steps with predatory grace. With each step closer, his certainty grew, and with it, his confusion. Because she smelled exactly like her. Not similar, not reminiscent, identical. Honeysuckle and rain and the particular warmth that had haunted his dreams for 5 agonizing years. His wolf was howling now, demanding he claim what was his, but his mind rebelled against the impossibility. "I am no one," the woman said flatly. "A shadow. A blade. That's all you need to know." Calen stopped directly before her, close enough to see the faint scar running along her hairline, a scar Seraphine never had. Close enough to smell the wolfsbane still clinging to her clothes. Close enough to see that behind her defiant stare was nothing. No recognition. No memory. No spark of the bond that had once tied their souls together. She looked at him like he was a stranger. "Who sent you?" he demanded. "Does it matter?" She smiled coldly. "I failed. Execute me and be done with it." "She was carrying this, Your Majesty." Rorik stepped forward, holding out a small leather journal. "Written in code, but our scholars believe it contains assassination orders." Calen took the journal without looking at it. His eyes never left the woman's face. Somewhere beneath that cold exterior, beneath whatever had been done to her, was his mate. He was certain of it now. The bond didn't lie. His wolf didn't lie. But how? How could she be alive? And why didn't she know him? "Take her to the tower," he commanded abruptly. "The Queen's chambers." The room erupted. "Your Majesty," Rorik protested. "She's an assassin. She should be in the dungeons." "Did I ask for your opinion, Commander?" The words cut through all objections. Rorik's mouth snapped shut, but Calen could feel the disapproval radiating from his wolves. They didn't understand. How could they? "The Queen's chambers," Calen repeated, his tone brooking no argument. "Post guards at every entrance. No one speaks to her but me." As the guards hauled her to her feet, The woman's voice cut through the chaos. "You're making a mistake," she called out. "I will complete my mission." Kaelin paused at the base of the throne, not turning around. "Your mission was to kill me," he said quietly. "But you won't. And why is that?" He finally looked back at her, and for just a moment, let his wolf's presence bleed into his gaze, turning his silver eyes to molten gold. "Because you're already dead, Seraphine, and I need to know who brought you back." The Queen's chambers hadn't been touched in 5 years. The assassin, Nyx, Kaelin reminded himself. That was what the Coalition called her. Stood in the center of the room, her chains removed, but her wrists still raw from the iron. She was studying her surroundings with the calculated assessment of someone mapping escape routes, not someone recognizing a space that had once been hers. Kaelin watched from the doorway, unable to enter. The room still smelled of her. The real her. Her. From before. Honeysuckle sachets in the drawers, the faded scent of her skin on the pillows he'd never allowed the servants to change. He'd sealed these chambers like a tomb, a shrine to his grief. And now she stood in the middle of it, a stranger wearing his mate's face. "Lavish prison," she remarked, running her fingers along the carved bedpost. "Do you treat all your assassins so generously?" "Only the ones who interest me." She turned to face him, and again he felt that visceral punch of recognition. The way she moved, the tilt of her head, it was all Seraphine. But the coldness in her eyes belonged to someone else entirely. "You called me a name," she said. "Seraphine. Who is she?" The question nearly broke him. "You don't remember?" His voice came out steadier than he felt. "I don't know what game you're playing, Wolf King." She crossed her arms. "But I have no memories before 3 years ago. The Coalition found me wandering the borderlands, half dead and empty. They gave me a purpose, a name. Everything else is darkness. 3 years. She'd been alive for 3 years while he'd been drowning in grief. While he'd been hunting her killers across kingdoms, burning villages and executing nobles, she'd been alive, and someone had stolen her from him. "What name did they give you?" he asked. "Nyx." Nyx. Night. Darkness. They'd stripped away her light and named her for Shadow. "That's not your name," Kaelin said, finally stepping into the room. "Your name is Seraphine Ashford. 5 years ago, you were my wife, my queen, my mate." For just a moment, something flickered in her amber eyes. Confusion? Recognition? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by skeptical coldness. "You're lying." "I don't lie." "Then you're mistaken." She moved toward the window, putting distance between them. "Whatever woman you lost, I'm not her. I'm an assassin. A weapon. That's all I've ever been." Kaelin felt his wolf clawing at his control, desperate to close the distance, to touch her, to prove the bond still existed. But he held himself back. She was a cornered animal right now, trained to kill, and taught to trust no one. If he pushed too hard, he'd lose her all over again. "You have a birthmark," he said quietly, "on your left hip. Shaped like a crescent moon." She froze. "You hum when you're thinking, even when you don't realize it. Always the same melody, an old lullaby your mother sang before she died." Her hand pressed against the window glass, knuckles whitening. "And when you sleep," Kaelin continued, moving closer despite himself, "you curl toward warmth. Every night we shared, you'd end up pressed against my chest by morning, your hand over my heart." "Stop," her voice cracked. "How do you know these things?" "Because I am your mate. Because I spent 3 years memorizing every detail of you and 2 years trying to forget them. Because the bond between us didn't die when I thought you did." She whirled to face him, and he saw it then. Fear. Genuine, desperate fear breaking through her assassin's mask. "You're wrong," she insisted, but her voice shook. "I would remember. I would feel something." "Do you feel nothing?" He held her gaze, letting her see the pain he'd carried for 5 years. When you look at me, when you smell my scent, when you hear my voice, is there nothing? The silence stretched between them like a blade. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, there's something. I don't know what it is. It's been there since they dragged me into the throne room, like a pull I can't explain. The bond, even broken, even buried beneath whatever they'd done to her, the bond remained. That pull, he said softly, is the same thing that's kept me alive through 5 years of wanting to die. It's the thread that ties your soul to mine, and whoever took you, whoever erased your memories, they couldn't destroy it. A tear slipped down her cheek, the first crack in her armor. I was sent to kill you, she whispered. That's all I know. All I'm supposed to do. Then why haven't you tried? She had no answer. Kaelin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed the tear from her cheek with his thumb. The moment his skin touched hers, electricity arced through his entire body. He heard her sharp intake of breath and knew she'd felt it too. I'm not asking you to trust me, he said. I'm asking you to let me prove what I'm saying. Give me 3 days. If I can't convince you of the truth by then, I'll let you complete your mission. Her eyes widened. You'd let me kill you? If you're not Seraphine, if I'm wrong about everything, then I have nothing left to live for anyway. The confession hung between them, raw and brutal and true. She searched his face for deception and found none. 3 days, she agreed. But know this, Wolf King, if you're lying to me, I won't hesitate to put a blade through your heart. Kaelin stepped back, releasing her from the intensity of his presence. I know, he said. You already did that once before. Sleep came for her like a thief. Nyx hadn't meant to close her eyes. Assassins didn't sleep in enemy territory. That was the first rule of survival. But the bed was impossibly soft. The sheets smelled like something achingly familiar, and exhaustion had been her constant companion for as long as she could remember. She was running through a forest, branches tearing at her dress. Behind her, flames consumed the night sky, turning everything to crimson and gold. Someone was screaming. Or was she screaming? The smoke filled her lungs, choking her, blinding her. Seraphine, Seraphine! A man's voice, desperate with terror. She tried to turn toward it, tried to find him, but the fire was everywhere now, hungry and alive. Arms grabbed her from behind, not saving her, dragging her. Away from the voice, away from the flames, into darkness that swallowed everything she was. The last thing she heard before the void claimed her was a howl of pure anguish splitting the night. Nyx woke gasping, her hand pressed to her chest. The sheets were tangled around her legs, damp with sweat, and for a disorienting moment she didn't know where she was. The Queen's chambers, the Wolf King's castle, enemy territory. But even as she reminded herself of the danger, she couldn't shake the dream. It had felt less like imagination and more like memory, vivid and visceral in a way her dreams never were. The man's voice still echoed in her ears, the desperation in it, the love, the terror of loss. She'd heard that voice before, last night, in the throne room. Seraphine, the name the Wolf King had called her, the name that felt like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. A soft knock interrupted her, spiraling thoughts. Enter, she called, instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. The door opened to reveal an elderly woman carrying a tray of food. She was small and weathered, with kind eyes that crinkled when she saw Nyx awake. Good morning, my lady, the woman said, setting the tray on a nearby table. I'm Helga. I've served this household for 40 years. I'm not a lady, Nyx said automatically. I'm a prisoner. Helga's expression flickered with grief. You're the Queen's chamber's rightful occupant, far as I'm concerned. She started to leave, then paused at the door. I was there, you know. The night of the fire. Her voice had gone quiet, careful. I saw the king try to reach you. He burned his hands down to bone trying to pull you from the flames. The healer said he wouldn't survive. He did. But something in him died that night all the same. Nyx's throat tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know what kind of man you've been sent to kill. He's not a monster, whatever the coalition told you. He's a broken man who spent 5 years trying to find a reason to keep breathing. After she left, Nyx stared at the food without seeing it. Her hands were shaking. The dream, the fire, the voice calling her name. What if it's true? The thought was dangerous. The coalition had raised her, trained her, given her purpose when she'd had nothing but emptiness. They'd told her the northern wolves were savages, that the Alpha King was a tyrant who needed to fall. They'd never mentioned a queen. Never mentioned that the king might have had a mate who died, or didn't die. That afternoon, Kaelin found her in the queen's garden. She stood among the roses, her back to him, her fingers trailing along petals that had somehow continued blooming despite 5 years of neglect. His wolf settled at the sight of her, some primal part of him satisfied simply by her presence. You left the doors open, she said, without turning around. I did. I could have escaped, completed my mission. But you didn't. She finally turned to face him, and he saw the turmoil written across her features. The assassin's mask had cracked further, revealing the frightened woman beneath. I had a dream last night, she said. There was a fire. Someone was screaming my name. She swallowed hard. Your voice. You're remembering. I'm going insane, she countered. There's a difference. Tell me what else you saw. Arms pulling me away. Darkness swallowing everything. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And before that, before the fire, I felt safe. Like nothing in the world could hurt me. That was us, Kaelin said quietly. Before they took you. We had 3 years together before war came to our doorstep. Who? The question burst from her like a dam breaking. Who took me? Who did this? I don't know. The admission tasted like ash. I've spent 5 years hunting your killers and I never found them. Because you weren't dead. They hid you in plain sight, turned you into a weapon against me. The coalition, she breathed, horror dawning in her eyes. They must have had help, Kaelin continued. Someone who knew our schedules, our defenses. Someone who could start a fire in the Queen's chambers without anyone noticing until it was too late. She searched his face. Why would anyone go through such elaborate deception? Because killing me outright would have united the packs against them. But a grieving king, half mad with loss, making reckless decisions? That serves their purpose far better. The pieces were falling into place now, painting a picture of betrayal years in the making. I need proof, she said, her voice hardening. Not just words, not just dreams. If what you're saying is true, there has to be something I can't deny. Kaelin considered for a moment, then made a decision he'd been avoiding since the moment she'd knelt in his throne room. Come with me, he said. There's something you need to see. The underground crypt was cold as death. Kaelin led Nyx through winding corridors lit by flickering torches, each step taking them deeper beneath Valdris Keep. She could feel the weight of stone above them, centuries of history pressing down. The pull in her chest grew stronger with every step, as if something ahead was calling to her. The Hall of Queens, Kaelin explained. Every queen who has ruled beside the Alpha Kings is interred here, their memories preserved for eternity. The corridor opened into a vast chamber carved from living rock. Alcoves lined the walls, each containing a stone sarcophagus bearing the carved likeness of the woman within. But Kaelin didn't stop at any of these. He led her to the far end, where a single tomb stood apart from the others. Black marble, polished to a mirror shine. Fresh flowers lay at its base. White roses, she realized, the same ones that grew in the garden above. and carved into the lid was a face she knew, her own. Nyx's legs nearly buckled. She grabbed Kaylin's arm for support and stared at the effigy that stared back at her. Every detail was perfect. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her jaw, the small scar near her temple that she'd never been able to explain. Someone had carved her likeness with love and grief and painstaking precision. The inscription read, Seraphine Ashford Thorne, beloved queen, eternal mate, the light that darkness could not extinguish. I commissioned this myself, Kaylin said hoarsely, spent weeks with the sculptor, describing every detail of your face from memory. When it was finished, I came here every night for 2 years, just to look at you. Nyx couldn't speak. Her throat had closed entirely. She reached out with trembling fingers and touched the cold marble cheek, her cheek, and felt something crack open inside her. They told me you burned, Kaylin continued, that there was nothing left but ashes. I gathered those ashes myself, placed them in that tomb with my own hands. But I'm not dead, she whispered. No. His voice broke. You're not. Tears streamed down her face, grief for a life she couldn't remember. Who was she? Nyx asked. Who was I? You were a healer's daughter from the southern valleys. Your mother died when you were young, and your father raised you to help the sick and wounded. You had no wolf blood, no noble lineage, and no political value whatsoever. He paused, lost in memory. I met you during the border wars. You were tending wounded soldiers, mine and the enemy's alike, because you said suffering didn't recognize battle lines. I thought you were the bravest woman I'd ever seen. Despite everything, Nyx felt the ghost of a smile. And you fell in love with a commoner? How scandalous. I fell in love with you. The title was irrelevant. My council raged for months, threatening rebellion. I told them I'd rather lose my throne than lose you. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small locket on a silver chain. Old and tarnished, clearly well worn. You gave me this on our wedding night. There's a portrait inside, your mother's. You wanted me to carry a piece of your heart wherever I went. Nyx's hands shook as she took the locket. The metal was warm from being pressed against his chest. She fumbled with the clasp, terrified of what she'd find. The locket opened. A woman's face, gentle eyes, warm smile, and dark hair, stared back at her. A face she'd seen in her dreams. A face that had whispered lullabies in the darkness of her fractured memory. Mother. Pain exploded behind her eyes. She cried out, dropping the locket as her hands flew to her temples. Images crashed through her mind, fragmented, chaotic, and overwhelming. A cottage in a green valley. Learning to bind wounds, her father's laugh. The day he died. Wandering alone. War. And blood. Then, silver eyes in a crowded field hospital. A voice asking her name. Hands impossibly gentle for a king. A kiss in a moonlit garden. A wedding. A crown she never wanted. 3 years of happiness that felt like stolen time. Then fire. Smoke. Terror. Someone dragging her away while she screamed for Kaylin! His name tore from her throat with 5 years of suppressed anguish. She collapsed, but he caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her against his chest as her body convulsed with the force of returning memories. I'm here, he breathed into her hair. I'm here, Seraphine. I've got you. They took me. She was sobbing now, clutching his shirt like a lifeline. They took me, and they made me forget, and they sent me back to... Oh gods, I almost killed you. But you didn't. His arms tightened around her. You didn't, my love. You came back to me. She pulled back just enough to look at his face, really look at it, and saw him clearly for the first time. Not a target, not an enemy king. Her mate, the man who had loved her, mourned her, and never stopped hoping. I remember, she whispered, cupping his face in her trembling hands. Not everything, but enough. I remember loving you. Tears streamed down his face as he pressed his forehead to hers. For a long moment, they simply held each other in the Hall of Queens, surrounded by the dead, celebrating the miracle of survival. But even as Seraphine surrendered to the comfort of his arms, a new fear was taking root. She remembered now. She remembered who had dragged her from the fire, who had handed her to the Coalition's agents. Kaelin, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I know who did this. His entire body went rigid. Who? Seraphine took a deep breath. Your brother. The name hung in the air like poison. Your brother. Kaelin released her slowly, his face draining of color. Varen, he said finally. You're saying Varen did this? Seraphine nodded, the memories still raw and jagged. He was there that night. In our chambers, before the fire started. I thought he'd come to warn us of danger. Her voice cracked. Instead, he held a cloth over my face, something sweet. It made my head spin, my limbs go weak. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was him setting the curtains ablaze. Kaelin turned away, his shoulders rigid with tension. She watched his hands curl into fists, watched the tremor run through his frame. He stood beside me at your funeral, Kaelin said quietly. He held me when I broke down. He helped me search for your killers for 2 years, knowing all along. His voice shattered. The howl that erupted from him was barely human. It echoed off the crypt walls, filled with 5 years of grief now curdling into rage. Seraphine flinched but didn't retreat. This was her mate's pain, and she would bear witness. When the howl faded, Kaelin's eyes had shifted to molten gold, his wolf surging to the surface. Where is he? I don't know, but I remember something he said while I was slipping away. She met his gaze. The crown should have been mine. If I can't have it, I'll make sure you suffer. We grew up together. Kaelin's voice had dropped to a whisper. I trusted him with everything. He wanted your throne. When you chose a commoner as queen, he saw his chance. A king weakened by grief makes mistakes. A king who alienates his nobles is ripe for overthrow. Footsteps echoed in the corridor above. Commander Rorik's voice carried down the stairs. Your Majesty, Lord Varen requests an audience. He says it's urgent, something about the assassin. Seraphine saw rage flicker across Kaelin's face before he suppressed it. Tell my brother I'll receive him in the throne room within the hour. After Rorik departed, Seraphine gripped Kaelin's arm. Can you face him without revealing what you know? I've been doing it for 5 years without realizing. His jaw tightened. At least now I'll know the monster I'm looking at. The throne room felt different now that Seraphine knew the truth. She stood in the shadows behind a pillar, hidden from view, but able to see everything. Kaelin sat on the obsidian throne, his posture deliberately relaxed, and his expression carefully unreadable. To anyone who didn't know him, he appeared calm, perhaps even bored. But she could feel the tension through their bond, the way his fingers gripped the armrest too tightly, the coiled violence waiting beneath his skin. The doors swung open, and Varen Thorn entered. He was handsome, Seraphine noted with detached observation, the same dark hair as Kaelin, the same sharp features, but somehow less. Where Kaelin radiated natural authority, Varen projected calculated charm. Where Kaelin's presence commanded respect, Varen's invited trust. The perfect mask for a traitor. Brother. Varen swept into an elegant bow. Thank you for seeing me so quickly. I know you must be preoccupied with recent events. You said it was urgent. Kaelin's voice betrayed nothing. Something about the assassin? Indeed. Varen clasped his hands behind his back, the picture of concerned counsel. I've received disturbing intelligence from my sources in the south. The woman you captured, she's no ordinary blade for hire. She's one of the Coalition's elite. They're shadow wraiths, they call them. Assassins so thoroughly conditioned that they feel no fear, no loyalty, and no emotion whatsoever. He shook his head with practiced sorrow. I'm afraid rehabilitation is impossible. The kindest thing would be a swift execution. He's trying to eliminate me before I can expose him, Seraphine realized, her hand tightening on the blade concealed in her sleeve. Interesting, Kaelin said mildly. And where did this intelligence come from? Merchants with border contacts. Information travels when gold loosens tongues. I see. Kaelin rose from the throne, descending the steps with predatory grace. Then perhaps your merchants can also explain something else. The assassin was carrying silver nitrate mixed with moonshade extract, a compound that only grows in our northern territories. He stopped directly before his brother. In fact, I believe the only cultivated supply exists in your private gardens. The color drained from Varen's face like water from a cracked vessel. That's a coincidence, he stammered. Moonshade has many applications. And poison is one of them. Kaelin's voice had gone deadly quiet. How did Coalition assassins acquire a northern compound from your personal supply, brother? Varen's composure crumbled. His eyes darted toward the doors. His hand twitched toward his boot. You're making accusations without evidence. 5 years of whispering in my ear. Turning me against allies, encouraging wars that weakened our borders. Kaelin's voice rose with each accusation. And looking me in the eye while knowing you murdered my mate and watched me destroy myself with grief. The throne room had gone deathly silent. Guards shifted uneasily, hands moving to weapons. Varen's pretense shattered completely. His face twisted with hatred, the mask finally slipping to reveal the monster beneath. She was a commoner, he spat, all pretense abandoned. A peasant girl with dirt under her fingernails and no understanding of what ruling requires. You were supposed to choose a proper mate, someone with power, with connections. Instead, you picked a healer's daughter and made her queen. So you burned her alive. I freed you from your foolish infatuation, and you couldn't even appreciate it. 5 years I waited for you to rebuild, to choose properly. But you just kept mourning her. Kept visiting that ridiculous tomb. His hand moved toward his boot. Seraphine stepped from the shadows. In one fluid motion, she drove her blade through his reaching hand, pinning it to his thigh. Varen screamed, a high, undignified sound that echoed off the stone walls. Hello, Lord Varen, she said calmly, crouching beside him. Remember me? His eyes went wide with recognition and terror. Impossible, he gasped. You're supposed to be empty, broken. How do you remember? She smiled coldly. Turns out your conditioning wasn't as thorough as you thought. Or maybe the mate bond is stronger than your coalition handlers realized. As guards hauled the screaming Varen away, Kaelin turned to Seraphine. The gold was fading from his eyes, replaced by exhaustion. It's over, he said quietly. But she was shaking her head. He was too confident at the end. The coalition doesn't rely on single points of failure. A horn sounded in the distance, then another. Rorik burst through the doors, face ashen. Armies on the southern border. Coalition banners? Thousands of them. He swallowed. And the eastern and western packs are marching with them. Seraphine felt her blood turn to ice. Your brother has been busy, she said grimly. 5 years of turning friends into enemies. How long until they reach the keep? 2 days. 2 days to prepare for an army that outnumbered them 10-1. The war was just beginning. The next 36 hours blurred together in a haze of preparation and growing dread. Seraphine moved through Valdris Keep like a ghost, coordinating defenses with an efficiency that surprised everyone except Kaelin. The coalition had trained her for infiltration and assassination, but they'd also taught her strategy, logistics, and how to identify weaknesses in fortifications. Now she turned that knowledge against them. Collapse the southern tunnels, she ordered a group of engineers gathered in the war room. They'll try to breach from below. It's what I would have done. Reinforce the eastern gate with wolfsbane barriers. It won't stop them, but it'll slow any wolves in their vanguard. Position archers with overlapping fields of fire, here, here, and here. She jabbed at the map. Make them pay for every inch of ground. Kalen watched her work with something like wonder. This was a side of her he'd never seen. The warrior forged in coalition fires, sharp and decisive and utterly ruthless. You're terrifying, he murmured during a brief moment alone. She flashed him a tired smile. I prefer effective. But beneath her calm exterior, fear gnawed at her heart. The approaching armies were vast, far larger than anything Valdres Keep could withstand indefinitely. Without reinforcements, they were simply delaying the inevitable. As night fell on the second day, she found Kalen on the battlements, staring at the approaching army's distant fires. Their cooking fires dotted the darkness like malevolent stars, a constellation of destruction drawing closer. You should rest, she said, coming to stand beside him. So should you. I've forgotten how. They stood in silence, watching enemy lights flicker. When Kalen spoke again, his voice was barely audible. I need to tell you something, in case tomorrow. Don't. She grabbed the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. I didn't survive 5 years of hell, didn't claw my way back from the void, just to watch you give up when things get difficult. I'm not giving up, I'm trying to prepare you. For what? Widowhood? She laughed bitterly. I've already mourned you once. When the coalition told me you were my target, some part of me grieved. The bond was there, even when my memories weren't. Her voice cracked. The mate bond isn't just magic. It's not just fate or wolf instinct. It's a choice. Every day, choosing each other despite everything that tries to tear us apart. I choose you, Kalen Thorne, in this life and whatever comes after. I choose you when we're winning, and when we're losing, and when the whole world is burning around us. So don't you dare prepare me for your death because I'm not accepting it? For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then his arms wrapped around her with desperate strength. I choose you too. He breathed into her hair. I chose you when you were a healer with no name. I chose you when my kingdom threatened to revolt. I chose you when I thought you were dead. And I choose you now that you've come back to me. Then fight for me. She pulled back to meet his eyes. Not like you're already defeated. Fight like you have something to live for. Resignation burned away from his expression, replaced by fierce determination. If we survive this, he said slowly, a hint of his old spark returning, I'm going to need a new queen. Despite everything, the army below, the battle tomorrow, the very real possibility of death, Seraphine laughed. Was that a proposal? A statement of intent. The actual proposal comes after we win. Then I suppose I'd better make sure we do. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate. When they broke apart, hope had joined their fear. Dawn came blood red. The coalition army spread across the valley like a dark tide. At its head rode a figure in silver armor. General Mordecai Ashworth, Rorik said grimly, the butcher of the southern valleys. The parley took place on neutral ground. Surrender the throne, Mordecai offered. Accept exile, and your people will be spared. And Seraphine? She returns to us. Her conditioning can be restored. I would rather die, Seraphine said clearly, than become your weapon again. As they turned to leave, Mordecai's voice carried across the field. A shame, truly. She has her mother's eyes, you know. Seraphine froze. Her mother's eyes. But there was no time for questions. The drums were growing louder. War had come. The battle began with arrows. They fell like black rain, thousands of shafts darkening the sky before plunging toward the defenders on the walls. Seraphine ducked behind a merlin as death whistled past, pressing her back against cold stone. Shields! Rorik's voice roared above the chaos. Return fire! She rose with the command, drawing and loosing in one fluid motion. Her arrow found its mark. A coalition soldier scaling a siege ladder 50 feet below. He tumbled backward, taking 2 others with him. 3, she counted. That's 3 for the hundreds more coming. The coalition's strategy became clear within the first hour. Waves of infantry threw themselves at the walls. absorbing casualties while siege engines rolled into position. It was a war of attrition, using overwhelming numbers to exhaust the defenders before the real assault began. "They're testing us," Kalen growled, appearing at her side with blood already spattering his armor. "Looking for weak points. They'll find them eventually." Seraphine loosed another arrow. "We don't have enough soldiers to cover every section." "I know." The admission hung heavy between them. They both understood what it meant. By midday, siege engines reached striking distance. The first boulder hit the eastern tower with a sound like the world cracking. Stone exploded outward, sending defenders tumbling into the chaos below. Seraphine felt the impact through her bones, felt the ancient walls shudder. "Fall back to secondary positions," Rorik commanded. "Archers to the inner walls." The retreat was orderly but devastating. Every yard surrendered was a yard closer to the keep's heart, to the civilians sheltering below, to the wounded being tended in the great hall. Seraphine descended from the walls as fighting turned close quarters. Coalition soldiers poured through a breach in the northern section, overwhelming defenders. She threw herself into the melee without hesitation. Her body moved on instinct, the deadly muscle memory the coalition had trained into her bones. Slash, parry, thrust. Bodies fell around her. "Just keep fighting, just keep moving." "Seraphine!" Kalen's voice cut through the chaos. She turned to see him fighting toward her, his sword carving a bloody path through enemy ranks. He moved like death incarnate, faster, stronger than any wolf she'd ever seen. "This is the Alpha King at war," she realized. "This is the monster the coalition trained me to kill." And watching him fight to reach her, she had never loved him more. They met in the courtyard, back to back, surrounded by enemies. "This would be a terrible time to die," she panted. "Agreed." He blocked a sword stroke meant for her spine. "I still owe you a proposal." Despite everything, she laughed. Then, horns. Not coalition drums. A deep, resonant call from the northern mountains that seemed to shake the very air. Wolves. Thousands of wolves crested the hillside, their howls joining into a chorus that made the ground tremble. At their head ran a massive black wolf with eyes like molten gold, and beside it, a dozen more alphas, each leading their own pack. "The northern clans," Kalen breathed. "They came." The coalition's formation shattered as reinforcements crashed into their flank. What had been an organized siege became chaos. Wolves tearing through infantry while human soldiers scrambled to reform their lines. "Press the advantage!" Rorik's voice boomed. "For Valdris! For the king!" The defenders surged forward with renewed ferocity. Seraphine moved with them, exhaustion forgotten in the rush of impossible hope. Through the chaos, she spotted General Mordecai fighting toward the keep's inner gates. Not retreating, moving forward, toward the civilians. She broke from the battle and caught him at the threshold of the great hall. "Stop." Mordecai turned slowly. In the torchlight, his weathered face showed no fear, only a strange, tired sadness. "You fight well," he said. "Better than I expected. Your mother would be proud." "How do you know my mother?" "Because I killed her." The words hit like a physical blow. Ilara Ashford was descended from the first wolves, the original bloodline with abilities lost for centuries. Healing, the power to command any wolf. He met her eyes. She had the gift. The coalition wanted to recruit her. She refused, threatened to expose our experiments. "So you murdered her." "I had no choice." Something like regret flickered in his cold eyes. "But before she died, she made me promise, made me swear on my own life, that I would never touch her daughter. And yet here we are. When Varen offered you to us, I didn't realize who you were. Not until too late." His voice cracked. "That's why I'm surrendering now. The battle is lost, but you deserve to know the truth about your bloodline." "What am I?" "First blood. Ancient power, awakened through the mate bond. When you bonded with the Alpha King, you became something unprecedented. A first blood wolf mated to the most powerful alpha in 3 centuries. Horror and wonder tangled in her chest. Your mother was right, Mordecai whispered. You are my destruction. Hours later, the battle was won. Coalition forces surrendered in droves once word spread that their general had been captured and their Alpha allies had fled. The Eastern and Western packs disappeared into the wilderness rather than face the Alpha King's justice, a problem for another day. Seraphine stood on the battlements as clan leaders pledged allegiance below, their howls of loyalty echoing off the ancient stones. The victory celebration was already beginning, torches being lit, musicians emerging from wherever they'd sheltered during the siege, the smell of roasting meat drifting up from the courtyards. Their howls should have filled her with joy. Instead, Mordecai's words haunted her. First blood. The power to command any wolf. You became something unprecedented. What did that mean for her future? For her and Kaelin? Would her own people come to fear her the way the coalition had feared her mother? You're thinking too loudly. Kaelin's arms wrapped around her waist from behind, his warmth a welcome contrast to the cool night air. The bond, he explained at her questioning look. I can feel your thoughts spinning, sharp edges and tangled threads. That's unsettling. I find it comforting. It means you're alive. It means you're here. She turned in his embrace to face him, searching his eyes for any trace of fear or hesitation. Aren't you afraid, knowing what I might become? I've been afraid for you since the moment you walked into my throne room wearing a stranger's face. He cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. Afraid of losing you again. Afraid of what they'd done to you. Afraid you'd never remember what we had. But afraid of me? Never. His eyes blazed with absolute certainty. Not for a single heartbeat. Even knowing I could command any wolf? That I could theoretically unite every pack under my will? Or tear them all apart? That's exactly what you'll need to be my queen. A hint of his old smile played at his lips. The territories have been fractured for too long. The coalition wouldn't have gained such a foothold if the packs had been united. You're not going to become a tyrant, Seraphine. You're going to bring peace. How can you be so sure? Because I know you. He gathered her hands in his, pressing them over his heart. I know the woman who tended wounded soldiers regardless of which side they fought for. I know the wife who stood beside me even when my own nobility called for her exile. I know the warrior who fought her way back from oblivion rather than become a weapon pointed at my heart. He leaned his forehead against hers. First blood or not, ancient abilities or not, you're still you. And you've always had the power to change the world. Now you simply have the means to do it. Tears spilled down her cheeks, tears of relief, of exhaustion, of emotions too vast to name. I love you, she whispered. I loved you before I remembered your name. I think I loved you even when I was supposed to kill you. I know. He smiled, that rare, devastating smile that made her heart stutter. The bond told me. Even when your mind forgot, your soul never did. He reached into his coat. Not his armor, she noticed. He must have changed at some point, and withdrew something small and gleaming. A ring. Silver and moonstone, delicate but strong, clearly old and clearly precious. The moonstone caught the starlight, glowing with an inner luminescence that seemed almost magical. This belonged to my mother, he said quietly, and her mother before her. It's been waiting in my vault for 5 years, because I couldn't bear to look at it knowing it would never be worn. He dropped to one knee on the cold stone of the battlements, and Seraphine's breath caught. Seraphine Ashford, Kaelin said, his voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. You've already been my wife, my queen, my mate. But that was before. Before Varen's betrayal. Before the coalition's schemes. Before we both walked through fire and came out changed. He held up the ring like an offering to the stars. Will you choose me again? Not because a bond compelled you or a ceremony bound you, but because... Yes. The word burst from her before he could finish. Yes, she repeated, laughing through her tears. 1,000 times yes. You impossible, romantic, ridiculous man. Yes. Kalen's face split into a grin as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. And perhaps, in some ancient, magical way, it had been. He rose and pulled her into a kiss that tasted of victory and promise and the future they would build together. When they finally broke apart, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky above them. Below, wolves howled their triumph to the rising moon. Torches blazed in the courtyard. Somewhere, musicians were playing a wild, joyful tune that spoke of survival against impossible odds. What happens now? She murmured against his lips. Now? Kalen tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch impossibly gentle for hands that had dealt so much death today. Now we rebuild. We track down the remaining conspirators. We figure out exactly what your abilities can do. His eyes gleamed with something that might have been anticipation. And we make the coalition regret ever thinking they could tear us apart. That sounds exhausting. It will be. He kissed her forehead. But we'll do it together. Together. The word wrapped around her like a promise. After 5 years of separation, 3 years of emptiness, and 2 days of impossible battle, they had found their way back to each other. Seraphine leaned into her mate's embrace and let herself believe, finally, that the worst was over. There would be more battles to fight, more enemies to face, more secrets to uncover about her bloodline. The road ahead was long, but for now, for this one perfect moment, there was only the warmth of Kalen's arms, the weight of his ring on her finger, and the unshakable certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. The assassin who had come to kill the king had found something far more precious than revenge. She had found her way home.